Let me unmute, stop video. Okay, I think I'm ready. For our first time, we're going to use this GUI interface, kind of like is available in Microsoft Access. So now it wants my column name. I've got my column name here as ID. The important thing for this ID column is its data type. We want this column to automatically generate a number whenever we insert a new row. This is an important one, and it's pretty handy to know how to do it. So for our data type, we want to set this to be an integer. We can kind of look and see we've got small int, we have tiny int. I could use unique identifier because I want this to be a unique thing, but I'm just going to stick with int. Now, in my GUI application here, down at the bottom, should see your column properties. So these are the specific properties, detail properties for this column that we're looking at right now. For our ID column, we want to find the identity specification property. In the identity specification, right now it says no. We want to change that to say yes. And you can't actually change right there on that main display. If you notice, you have to use the sort of triangle thing. Yes, sir? Is it messed up? I thought he had his hand. Okay, so expand that so that you can see the is identity option. And when you're down in that detail level, then it will let you use this drop down to change the is identity to yes. Now, once you change that, that's telling SQL Server that you expect the database to generate the number, the value, anytime a row is inserted into this table. Right now, we've got the identity seed set to 1. So that means the very first row inserted in this table is going to have an ID of 1. We have the increment of 1. So that means we're going to add 1 every time we add a row. Now, we could change that if we wanted. We could say that the first identity is 10,000 and that we want it to add 1,000 to everyone if we wanted to. So however we want to set up that identity column, we can do that. Now, I think that should be fine. I'll leave it as 1 and 1. And should be all we need on there. We have to make sure that our allow nulls checkbox is unchecked because we're not going to allow nulls in that column. But the database is going to generate it for us anyways.
Yes, as soon as you hit is identity.
It's going to automatically, yeah, it's not going to allow anything there that it doesn't like.
I don't think it's important.
You what?
I don't think it's important. It's not showing anything.
Oh, it's me. Sorry, thank you, sir. Huh. I've got it hidden from myself. How's that? Is that better? Thank you. Okay, so find this. Okay, so our next column is color number. Now we said we wanted, or they said they wanted color number to be an integer also. In their document, they say they do not want to allow nulls, so I'm going to uncheck that. And they want a default value of 0. So if you look down here in your column properties for that column, do you see where we might see a default value or set it? No, because this isn't an identity column. We only have one identity column, our ID. So this column is supposed to have a default value. Yep, so default value or bindings, I'm just going to click there in that property and enter the 0. But that's going to be our default value. Now when we use that default keyword, it has meaning because we've said, here's the default value. Now our next column, our third column, is going to be color name.
So what happens if you don't assign a value to that column?
you'll get like junk or else it'll cancel. You could try it and see. But it would not be a wise move, because if you're going to allow people to enter that kind of code, then you want a default value set. All right, what about our color name? What kind of field is it supposed to be? They said it's supposed to be a varchar. And a varchar means that it's going to be a variable number of characters up to a certain length. I'm going to click on this varchar 50, and then I'm going to change that 50 to a 10. And notice that changes the length property to a 10. So that means that this color name is a variable number of characters. The limit is 10. That's going to be the biggest we could have. But the database is only going to store the relevant characters. It's going to be variable. It's not going to store extra spaces that are unnecessary.
You can also change that the number of characters in the field on the top.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's where I changed it. So either place. Now, in your allow nulls column for this color name, we are going to allow nulls for our colors, and we are not going to set a default. So I think we're set for our table. So I'm going to save this thing, and let's save it as, what did they call this thing? Color sample.
But does it automatically assume the ID is the primary key?
That's a good question. We should double check, huh? Let's cancel. If you already saved, it might let you update it. Let's try. What should we look at there? I was totally forgetting. We said it's an identity specification. Was that enough?
Well, you know, it looks like, I mean, I see a regular data space bar here on the right-hand side of the properties, but nothing that's. Well, I would guess that if it is the identity specification. You have two tables or two columns of identity specification. Is that yes?
That would be confusing it, wouldn't it?
You can save a two-character field. I mean,
But it doesn't look like we can set that ID anywhere in our properties, does it? We have to come up here and right-click and set it as our primary key. Good save.
yeah, we should want to do that.
Right-click up here on your ID column and set as a primary key.
Is it possible to have a table without a primary key?
Yes, but it'll complain at you and it will be slow to access. But oftentimes people will set up a small table without a primary key. So let's save it. So we have our color sample table. When you look over here on the left in your browser, you might have to refresh a couple of times to get it to show that table. Ooh, mine showed up right away. I love it when it works. You know, I'm looking at the PowerPoint. Let's create, oh wait, before we do that, we have used this graphical user interface now to create this table. What if we would like to create the same table in another database? Like we have our SQL server running at home and we've got some databases created there, or we want to copy this table from this database to our database that we're going to use for C# or something like that. Well, there's some things that we can do to assist in that. So on our color sample table, if you right-click and you choose Script Table As, we can say, well, I would like a script that will create this table. So I can generate that script. I'm going to tell Management Studio to send that script to just a new query editor window. Notice I can send it to a file or whatever I want, but I just want it to go to a new query window so we can look at it. So while it's doing it, we've seen so far that we use SQL, which is structured query language. Last time we saw that the insert statement was DML, data manipulation language. And the last language that we'll learn in our class is DDL, data definition language. And that's where we create tables and update table definitions. And that's the kind of code that's going to be generated here for us when we script this table. So if you scroll down, you'll see the primarily important part of this is this create table syntax. We'll be learning it in a few weeks, so you don't need to be really worried about it. Just take a look at it and notice how it took all of this information that we specified on that GUI screen and then generated the syntax to run that as a create table statement. So we could run this in any database we wanted and it would create that table for us. So as a database administrator, we could create a table in the first place using this syntax, our DDL syntax. We can use the GUI and then generate the DDL syntax. Different ways of doing it, different tools, different options. Here it gave us our primary key constraint when we added that to our table. It added another constraint saying that there was a default of 0 for the color number. So notice how everything that we entered on that GUI screen got turned into this code. So I said we'll be looking at that soon. Just be aware that that's going on behind the scenes and it's available to you to generate if you need to copy some sort of definition from one place to another. So great, I'm going to create a new query window to do some of those insert statements. I'm going to use my database and be sure that I'm in the right place. And you should use yours because we created this color sample in our database. So I want to insert into our color sample database. This first insert we did is going to be the color number. And we have our values of 606. Again, SQL Management Studio has not revised its memory to know about our new table. So we get kind of some syntax error warnings while we're getting started until it's like, oh yeah, that table does exist, I see. So always remember you're the one in charge. It's not, I'm going to run this. We should see one value get inserted into our table. I'm going to name this properly. I'm going to save it. Save SQL query 3 as insert color. Now, in our color sample table, I want to create a new query window and just select everything from it. So as we run our inserts, we can continue selecting and seeing what we have in our color sample table. So right now, I should have that one row that we just inserted.
Oh, whoops, when you run that twice, it will insert it double.
Yeah, how many times will it insert it for you? Hundreds, as many times as you'd like. It generates a unique ID, exactly. And we don't have any other rules in there to say there's anything else to check. So it's like, okay, I don't care how many times you put it in there. Yeah, it's really easy to mess them up. It is. So let's do our next insert. I'm going to put it on our same SQL screen.
So if we wanted to remove that one, would it be a drop? Because drop removes the data from the entire thing.
Drop moves the whole table. Yeah. So what would you want to do to get rid of just that row? What was that command? Delete. He's on it. Now I only want to run this new insert. So I'm going to select it and execute it.
You know, it will not allow me to create the table.
Is it already created?
Nope, because I do a query on it and I get nothing. Oh, there we go.
Oh, so it's got your stuff.
It's got it.
That's good.
It didn't do that.
Just didn't insert anything into it yet. Try your insert again.
Oh, I didn't do an insert yet.
Oh, okay.
Is it okay to do a select from all and then see everything?
Uh-huh. Now I've got that insert done. I'm going to go back to my query, my select, and just run it again. I see now my table's updated with my yellow row, and my color number went to the default value of 0, even though I didn't specify that keyword default, right? So that default value will be used no matter how the syntax is entered. That's why, as a database administrator, we want to put things like that to make sure we're going to have valid data. Now, our next insert, we are going to insert the values using our default and orange. And we should see that this looks just the same as the previous insert. I'll execute it. Go back to my query. Where am I? Mine is whacking out, sorry. Now, I see that my insert, like I said, didn't matter which way I did it. I'm gonna have to redraw my screen. I'm getting like some really weirdness going on here. There's our orange. Now, the last one they had, oh, they have a few more. Let's do this one where we want to insert into our color sample the values. Come on. Zoom hasn't messed up like this before. It must be our SQL Server Management Studio. Now this time I want to insert a color ID or code or whatever we called that of 808, but I want the name to be null. So I'm going to run that one. Like I said, Management Studio is going crazy for me, but it did work. Yes, sir?
I also learned that if you delete rows from that table, it doesn't automatically reset the ID column.
No, it doesn't reset your ID. That's already been used.
Okay, so there we go.
And that's kind of an auditing thing too, to make sure that database administrators and programmers can't be adding and deleting stuff and changing the results of things. It's always going to be missing until that table gets dropped and recreated. Now our last couple, they wanted us to try just the default values. So I'm going to try that. Insert into color sample. It just is not being happy. Values, default, and null. And I'll just run this one. Now if we run our query, we should see that new one that's totally worthless, 0 and null. The kind of row a database administrator loves to see. And then next, we should be able to do the same thing if we say default values.
Can you show me all that you've done? 'Cause
Sure.
I was recreating the table when you
No problem. That's about it. So that first one is color number 606.
But how come when you run yours, it doesn't seem to add them over and over again?
Yeah.
Do what?
How come when you run yours, it doesn't seem to add them over and over again like it was doing?
Because I've selected just the one I want to run. Can you guys make him hear things?
Yeah, it executes without highlighting anything. It does everything on the page.
Select it, just what you want to run.
Oh,
Do you understand? Do you get what I mean?
I'm sorry. I'm like,
No, that's okay.
trying to do the whole thing at the same time. That's stuff like that.
With the,
That's why last time I was like, look up here, look up here, look up here.
what were you ran? Column
Oh,
four.
wow. What was the default values thing again?
What did it do for you when you did it?
Now, like,
Can you need to see it?
what was that all about?
What did it do when you ran it?
Yeah, because 5 and 6 are the exact same thing.
Did it just give you those 0 and null? Just nothing, right? So
Correct.
just depends on what your default values are set to.
Give me nothing. And I just want to test that out. Yeah. Everything gave me something and I did it all day.
What do you mean everything gave you nothing? Are you going back and saying select star from color sample so you can see what's in your table? Or are you just inserting stuff into it? If you're inserting stuff into it, it's not going to give you any response other than one row inserted. You have to go to another screen and do your select statement to see what data is getting put into your table.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So, how would you reset the ID number back to 1 if you were?
You would not. You would have to drop that whole table completely and create it from scratch. Like I said, that's an auditing thing where programmers and database administrators are not allowed to reset those identity columns. If it's been used and it's just gone. And that's a normal thing.
It
You know,
doesn't
that's-
like my inserts. It just doesn't recognize the table.
Have you run them?
It's got the underlying.
Right, because memory has not been updated to know about that new table. So just run it anyways.
Okay, well, I've got to finish writing it to you.
Okay,
Made it so I can't read it.
yeah,
So far,
I
I've
had
got
to
the
switch
first
for
two.
Garrett.
Ah, that doesn't do anything. Nope. I don't know about you guys, but I'm already a professional. I mean, what I like to do, I guess, just to see it, is I like to have a select from before everything and then a select from after everything, so I can see what was changed in the table.
Sure, you could do that.
I'm a silly person, I have to see.
Either way, you can do it in another window or you can do it in that same one. Doesn't matter.
Oh, I think I got what the problem was.
Good.
It was getting mad at me for inserting, well, default in the parentheses for values.
Okay. Make sure you're getting your syntax just right. These defaults and default values are going to be things that you probably wouldn't see a lot of programmers doing because they should be supplying the appropriate value for the item. So we just see these kinds of things as we're being taught what kind of capabilities the database has. And it's definitely important because we want to know how to set those defaults and that they exist.
Can you overwrite what's in a column?
That's what we'll be doing next with our updates. We can try it.
We should have 5 records in the table.
I think so.
Hey, I'm good.
You got it? All right. So when we look at our insert, we've looked at so far that we could say insert into a table name from another table name, and we could make like a complete copy of that table, or we can insert into from a values list to update our table, or we could insert into a column list to update our table. No matter what, any of those are going to insert new data into our table. Now we can go a little bit further, selecting data from an existing table. Get this over here, by adding our where clause to our insert statement. So here we could insert all of the rows from our invoice copy table where that total owed amount is 0 into an invoice archive table, so we could keep a copy of those old invoices. But we could specify that where clause. So not much different than the ones that we did last time. Here, we're going to try this one, the same insert statement with a column list. Now, this one can get kind of tedious, huh? Didn't we do that last time too? Yes, so we're going to go to our update. All right, because we had looked at those. In our update statement, we can use the update statement to change data. So just like you guys were asking, that's exactly our next logical step, is how do we change data? So if you have your OneNote notes open, I had some inserts here, insert options. We could add a little bit more to that. Let me zoom in here. So we saw that we could insert without a column list or with a column list. We also saw that we could use the from keyword to specify a table to pull the data from. We could use the where keyword to specify which data. So all of these things give us a huge, huge number of options when we want to create temporary tables or create things that are copies of things. One of the things that IBM has been working on in the last few years, if you're aware, is they do a lot of data warehousing, big data. So big data type facilities like that, they built a big facility in Columbia, Missouri to do data warehousing and big data. Big data is all about the databases and all about manipulating data and moving it around. So think about how if you had millions of rows of information, you could use this knowledge to create temporary tables that you could pull from. Now our modify, is that where I am? No. Update. I wanted to copy this if it will let me. I'll just use the snipping tool.
And are these, did you say this is considered DE, still DML?
Data manipulation language, yep. Because we're manipulating the data that's in the database. So with our update syntax, we basically have the same kind of thing as we did with our insert. For our update, we can update with or without a column list. So our syntax shows us both. So we have the square brackets, and I know in this book, this is one of the only books I've ever seen where using the square brackets in the sample syntax is confusing. When they're showing us sample syntax, those square brackets mean optional. They don't mean make a table alias like we actually use them for, which is like confusing. They should have used a different character. But books always use these square brackets to mean optional. So what they're saying is you can use syntax like set column name 1 equal this value. Set column name 2 equal some value from whatever table you're working with. You can set up a table alias if you want. You can set our where condition and all of the same items that we could use for our insert. So can we do it without a column list? Does this syntax specify that there's any way I could specify what to update without the column name. Doesn't look like it, does it? So we cannot do without a column list. We use the set keyword to indicate the start of our list. And we have to have the from keyword for our table name to update. Now with our insert options, I think I'm going to add that to those notes. I want to add the into keyword because that's really the only type of syntax that uses that into keyword to specify our table name. So with our update, we could use our where. And in our update, our where clause is really important because it specifies what we want to update. So with our little color table, let's try some update commands and see if we can mangle it really bad, which I think we can. Let's create a new query window. And I'm going to make sure I'm using my database. And I want to update my color sample table. I want to set the color name equal to purple. And then like Richard was suggesting, we might as well have a select statement after that to see what we've done to our table. So I'm going to update it and set the color name to purple. What all rows is that going to impact?
Looks like all of them.
Looks like all of them, doesn't it? Oh, sure did. I have a whole bunch of purple now in my table. So is that what we really wanted to do? Maybe, but maybe not. Depends on what we were wanting to do. So what if I don't really want that to happen? Let's see, in this number 1, our column ID 1, where we set our color number to 606, I want that one to be yellow. So I'm going to say update color sample, set color name equal yellow, where ID equals 1. Now if I run that one, I should end up with our yellow in our color name. What about if we set our color name equal to orange, where our color number equals 0? Let's update all of those ones that have our default color number. Try it. Now we have several oranges. So our update statement will do exactly what we tell it to. And we have to be really careful that we tell it to do the right thing, what we really want to do, because we can easily incorrectly update data. Let's try another one that goes against our invoice copy table. I'm going to open a new query window. And I have my invoice copy table. If I expand it and expand the columns, I can really easily refresh my memory as to what columns were in that table. So I'm going to make sure I'm using my database. And I want to update that invoice copy table. So I want to set, oops, stop it. I want to update 2 columns. We're going to update our payment date column. So somebody got a payment, we made a payment to somebody, and we're going to put that into our database. So we did that on May 21st, way a few years ago. And we want to also include how much that payment was for. We made a payment of $19,351.18 to a specific invoice. It was invoice number 97/522. And then again, I could go ahead and select everything from our invoice copy so that we can see those updated rows or updated row. Let's run it. So I find that weird invoice 97/522. Oh, we have so many. It was a big payment. I should be able to find it. Do you see it? There it is. So here I find that row. It is invoice ID 78, vendor ID 121, and you'll see that our payment total is updated to that amount that we specified, and our payment date is set to that date. So in our update statement, we can have a list of columns to update. We're just going to have them separated by commas. We're going to have the column name and the value we want to set it to. Column name, value we want to set it to. Most of these updates would be done programmatically. We would be generating this update statement from our C# or Java code or JavaScript or whatever it is that we're using to access this database.
The easiest way I found to actually find it was to put a where statement and select.
And that's perfect. That's exactly what you want to do to narrow it down to that one that you updated. See what you've got. So when we look at our SQL statement, now we know why that where is like the most important part of everything, right? Because we're using it to select data, but we're also using it to update data. So our where clause, all of that logic that we put into our where clause is really what gives us the power of using the database. What's this one going to do? Update invoice copy, set terms ID equal 1, where vendor ID equal 95. Hopefully just what I said. Going to find vendor ID 95, update the terms ID column, and set it equal to 1. What about this one using some math here? We can add to our credit total column using the update statement. And of course, again, if we omit the where clause, everything's going to get updated. Now, here's an interesting one. This is what we really need to look at. We get into a little bit more complicated of updating. What's happening here? What's going to be happening in this subquery? Max invoice due date. Is that going to be our newest one? Our newest due date? So out of all of the invoices, we're going to find the newest invoice date, the one that's due the soonest.
Oh.
And then we're going to try to find that invoice. So we have limited funds. None of you guys are ever like that, I'm sure. We have limited funds, and we need to know which bill is due the soonest. So we're going to use that subquery to pull that out. So let's try that one.
Actually, Max is the one.
Do the furthest out? Do the
Yes.
furthest out? I don't know why we're trying to find that furthest out. Maybe we're making our long-term plans. So,
Well, an invoice is usually sent out this month. So you know, you wouldn't actually send an invoice that is due in July of next year today.
Hope not. No,
It's
you ain't.
take 30 days.
And we're trying to find the most recent invoice that we have to pay.
We're finding the one that has the maximum due date. So it should be the furthest out, right? The furthest away. Let's check this subquery and make sure. So, oops, it's mad at me.
Change your
Semicolon.
Oh, right
Yeah,
there.
you said it, not used it.
I keep wanting to set it. Why won't it let me do that?
You need a semi-active.
It should let me do whatever I
It'll do
want.
it anyway.
It did it anyways. Okay, so the furthest one out, the highest date we have in our invoice copy table is 2016-0501. So that's what our subquery results are. Now, if I actually embed that subquery, I'm going to put some parentheses around it here. And I'm going to embed it in this update statement. I want to update the invoice copy table. And I want to set the credit total up. So we're going to give some more credit here based on this due date. And I'm also going to update the invoice due date to be this maximum one that we got out of our subquery. And then I'm going to specify which invoice number I'm concerned about. So the logic of what we're doing here escapes me. I'm not exactly sure. We're just doing some random updates so that you can see how this updating works. So we're finding that maximum invoice date. We're finding our invoice 97-522, and we're going to update it to use the invoice date of our maximum one. What is on that invoice 97-522? That's the one we updated before. Right now, our invoice due date is 03/28. Let me see, what's our credit total? Our credit total is
It's 200.
200, so we should see it go up to 300. I have some weird remnants on my screen that I can't tell if they're really there or not. I think it ran it.
Try. I'm surprised it ran it with that word color scheme.
I don't know. It's not really there. It's just a remnant on the video.
If you do that, it's going to add another 100 to your credit total.
Jill highlights the second statement.
See if it'll let me. It's pretty whacked out from this Zoom thing. So yeah, here we go. We've set our invoice due date up to that maximum date. So now it's 05/01. And we've added to our credit total. So now it's 300 instead of 200. So we can use those subqueries in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different places. Gives us a lot of capabilities. Here's another one where we're using a subquery a little bit differently. In this one, we're using it in the where clause to specify which row we want to update. Makes sense, right? We can use that subquery for any of those things. We could use our subquery for a list. So we want to update all of our vendors in California, Arizona, and Nevada. We could say we want to update the top 10. So all of the where clause and subquery information that you've learned is applicable. It just builds on it, exactly. And then with your delete statement, it's pretty much the same. Let's look at our SQL Management Studio, and I'm going to create a new query and use my database. And I'm going to delete from color sample, and then I'm going to select from our color sample.
They're gonna delete everything out of the table.
Yep, it's going to delete everything, isn't it? Because I didn't specify a where clause to say which things I want to delete it. So with our delete syntax, we get into an even more simple delete. Our delete options, first of all, are we're going to delete from a given table where and when we're doing a delete, our where clause is critical because we can wipe out that whole table. Deleting is something that sometimes doesn't happen. You'll find as you get out into the world of work, then oftentimes databases are just expanded and expanded and expanded, and old data is often left out in the database. Because deleting can be so disruptive and destructive. So we can actually see that happen where data doesn't get deleted like it should. Now there are some great samples in the presentation in the book of doing deleting. The last syntax that's in our chapter is the merge statement. This gets really fancy, doesn't it? Look at all that optional syntax. So we can use the merge statement to create a new table using table sources where we're using some joining. So we can add join condition. We can say when it's matched with a certain condition. We can add additional matching by target and source.
You can do that all in one query.
So here's a really crazy one. They give us one example because it is pretty intense, but it gives you a lot of options. So here we're creating an invoice archive. Merge invoice archive as IA, using our invoice copy as IC, whenever the invoices are matching, and the payment date in our invoice copy is not null, and the payment total in our invoice copy is greater than the payment total in our archive, we want to update our archive. We're going to set all of those payment dates to the new amounts because we've received a new payment or made a new payment. If we don't find a match because we made a payment and we don't find a match in that invoice archive, then we're actually going to create a new row in our invoice archive table so that we can keep these payments up to date. So play with that one, see what you think about it, but as you can tell, it's pretty nice advanced syntax, so you can sure try it.
It looks like an incremental backup.
It does. It's doing it in the database. Now I know that there are a few problems for this week in your assignment, but they are pretty small, and so there's a small lab for you to do today with a partner before we get out of here. It's on Canvas, and it says, we have had a recall, and I'm just going to bring up this presentation that's out there for you. So you know, as a music store here, we sell a lot of Les Paul guitars and a lot of drums, right? That seems to be a big one. Let me switch here. Switch, you silly thing. Just going to have to show it to you this way. So we had a problem. Gibson got some improperly treated wood, and they're recalling some of their Les Paul models. So our product number 2 is one of those that have been recalled. So we need to find out some information about our product ID 2. First, we need a list of all the customers that have bought this guitar. The list should include the date they purchased it and the invoice number, as well as the relevant customer information. I'm going to leave that up to you and your partner as to what the relevant customer information is. What does our management need to know about these customers? Second, management needs to know how many customers overall are affected. They would like to have a list of the mailing addresses of the affected customers. And finally, a list of the total amount spent by customers on this product, because they want an idea of how much this is going to impact the bottom line. So we have some sales now that are going to have to be reversed. Now let's look at teams, because we're going to have to rearrange. We have a couple people not here. Let's see if I can put them in a group together. Let's see, Brian, that's not going to work. Justin and Garrett. We don't even have Chase. Where's Chase? Chase. Chris is here. He's quiet today. Chris and Isaac, Zeke and Cullen. Okay. Let's move Zeke to work with Austin.
Nice way to move things around.
Yeah, we'll fix it.
Drag and drop features. I forgot. Type this.
Taylor. with Kente. Okay, take a look, but I think that I have all our absent people in groups with each other, and you guys should all be in groups with people that are here. So see if you can find your partners and get these knocked out. Turn this in with a Word document. It's not set up on Office 365, just a Word document with that standard format with your results. And then get out of here. Try and get this one done today, though. It's due for today because I don't want it hanging over your head. Hmm?
Yeah. I think she changed them all.
You might have to refresh again. Might have to refresh. If it, I think they're all changed now.
Come back there.
Be right there. Yeah, it says I have my name. Okay. Isaac.
I'll come over there.
Justin Crabtree.
Let's see. You're here, Kente.
Oh, this is Week07 lab.
Just a second.
So is this on yes, this is for
You're with Taylor. So everybody else found their people. Let's see, who are you with? Sorry. Oh, you're with Jay. Okay, so you two are just going to have to get this together.
What's the name of this assignment?
It says Week07 Lab Recall, and I just published it, so you probably weren't seeing it before. I sneaked it up on you.
no sense in doing two. Okay.
That's all it takes.
Oh, yeah.
My sister with children. Oh, and I've been in their house.
So we
Oh,
need-
So I think it would be very easy to get sick. I got some of the
we need to get
Yeah.
product